So, please be seated. We're already slightly delayed, and that's why we will start now with the next session, our language-centric AI panel, and I will hand over right away to Jan Hajic, who's going to moderate the panel and introduce the panelists. Jan, over to you.
Okay, thanks Georg, for the introduction. So I'm Jan Hajic from Charles University in Prague again. I will be moderating this panel where we have 5 excellent panelists who will help us to introduce both the notion of language-centric AI, then we will talk about the vision for LT within or without AI, and then we will see how the discussion develops. And the purpose of this panel is to actually engage you in the audience here or online in discussing these issues. So while listening to me or the panelists, please prepare questions, open questions, provocative questions, or comments, or whatever you want to add to what we hear from our panelists. So, without too much more, I would like to introduce our panelists. So I will start online, if you allow me. So online, we have Joachim Keller from the Fraunhofer Institute. We have Jim Crowley from Grenoble, France. And we have Sabine Kirchmeier, the president of FNL from Luxembourg, I suppose, who are our online panelists. And then we have Philip Schlusalek from the leadership of Claire, otherwise from Saarbrücken. And then we have Daria Fischer from Slovenia, but as you might know, Daria Fischer is going to take over as an executive director of Clarin starting next year. So these are our 5 panelists. So I have distributed the first request for introductory comments, very short ones, so that we can give a lot of space to you as the audience about what they think or how they would define what language-centric AI actually is. So now when I introduced from the online, I will go backwards. So I would like to ask Daria first to start with her take on this topic.
Hello, everyone. Is my mic on? Yeah. It's very nice to be here and to see you all in person after such a long break. As I was invited to bring in the Clarin perspective, I would just like to differentiate myself from the other panelists by stating that probably Clarin is a slightly different party in this panel due to the fact that our primary focus is on the community of researchers and professionals in the SSH community. Which try to focus on or have a big research potential to deal with comparative and transnational research agendas. This means that the needs that Clarin needs to cater to are slightly different from maybe the industry players or the regular users of AI in the language technologies sector for a variety of different reasons. The most important one is that in the SSH community, researchers are mostly interested in tackling concepts and phenomena that are not necessarily bounded to a single language, to a single time period, to a single national border. And this is why the needs for the language technologies that we need to deliver for this community are much bigger, because they need to be able to deal with different types of documents, different language modalities, different time periods, and different languages at the same time. On the other hand, their problem is even greater by the fact that most of the researchers are actually interested in researching phenomena that would be rare by the standards of the AI and language models that mostly cater well to data that is, or phenomena that is frequent, much less so for the rare phenomena. Here I really see a big potential for multidisciplinary collaboration between researchers in the Clarin community and the SSH community at large, which can bring true breakthrough value, both from our technological development that we have already accomplished, but also from pilot basic research. What is needed for this, and this is the Clarin's task, is a strong emphasis on making sure that we achieve true interoperability of what we make on offer. We also need to make sure that we have transparent evaluation platforms and services for the researchers that want to use our technologies, and that we are very serious and very strict about the ethical issues. That's it for my opening statement.
Okay,
I'll
thanks,
be happy to address
thanks,
the
Daria,
questions.
from your perspective as from Clarin. And now, please, Philip, your view from the Claire point of view.
Yes, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me here on this panel, and welcome everyone. Yeah, so I'm from Claire, which we've actually founded almost exactly 4 years ago, with the aim of bringing together the European AI community in its broadest scope. And that has, I think, worked amazingly well. We now have over 440 labs, AI labs, with all sorts of backgrounds in AI that have joined Claire, and this is still increasing. This is now representing about 24,000 employees and staff and researchers, everyone involved, which is great. We are recently founded a what we call the Rising Researcher Network, which is for young AI researchers, which is actually gaining ground very nicely. If your students, PhD or master or even earlier want to join, please let them know. Just visit our website, claire-ai.org. The key thing that we defined Claire to be when we founded it, which was really a community effort, a bottom-up grassroots initiative, was to focus on all of AI, right? And that meant not just all different methods of AI, excellence in all of AI, but also all areas of AI. And that certainly includes language technology. Sometimes I'm surprised when people talk about language-centric and human-centric and kind of differentiate between language and AI in general. I mean, for me, language is such a fundamental part of the human, of being human, that I wouldn't even come to the idea of treating that separately. Of course, it is important, just like the vision community has their own problems, their own meetings, and so does language and other areas, robotics, for example, right? We need all the expertise and we need people to focus on certain areas. But at the end, language-centric and human-centric really is the same thing for me. And I think that is what we need to push forward. And also, I think we need to make ground there also at the European Commission, because they still separate this out into various different categories, and I think we need much more integration and coordination between the projects to reach the goals that we have found, but also the EU Commission has defined. I think there is a lot more that we need to do, and one of the things that we want to achieve with Claire is exactly achieving more of that integration and that coordination between the different projects, between the different communities, and whatever belongs to that. But there remains a lot to be done, and it's great to be here and to be able to have that discussion here, and hopefully there will be more chance to do that during the day.
Okay, thank you, Philip. So I'm glad that you, even though from very different communities, you share this interdisciplinarity view. After all, Clarin and Claire only differ in one letter in their name, right? Okay, Sabine, and your and Efnil's view, possibly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm sorry, I need to put off my can you still hear me? Yes. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me speak on behalf of EFNIL. To me, artificial intelligence is not really possible without language understanding, as also was said before. Language is dialogue, it is fuzzy concepts, it is associative reasoning, it's humor, it's navigating ambiguity and lots of variation between languages and between individuals. So language reflects the history and the culture of a country and of the language community, but also the special background of the individuals using the language. And it's constantly changing. So we should expect artificial intelligence to try to encompass all this, but we're far from that yet. As president of EFNIL and the European Federation of National Institutions for Language, I represent language institutions who have as their business to cater for the users of the official languages of their countries. They provide resources such as dictionaries, grammars, and text and speech collections, and they do research in language use and language development. And they're also engaged in teaching. And they give advice to the public about language, and they inform decision makers on language policy and planning. And they have a high interest in language technology and artificial intelligence, and therefore they're also part of the European Language Equality Project. To us, language-centric AI means that our languages thrive and develop as means for communications for our citizens, and no matter what language they speak. And AI should really enable mutual understanding between people. Most importantly, it must support the democratic dialogue and on equal terms for everyone, both nationally and internationally. I think one of the most striking examples that show why this is important is, for instance, the case of Greenlandic. There are about 50,000 speakers of Greenlandic, which is the official language of Greenland, a self-governing part of Denmark. And they made a huge effort to try to develop spell checkers, for instance, and empty systems, ready to be plugged into Microsoft. But Microsoft has refused to have it, and they will not include it into their distributions. So no one ever has had a user interface or a spell checker in Greenlandic. And you can imagine how difficult it is even to get such a simple service integrated. So we already see reports now from Iceland and Greenland about young children using English rather than their own language, because more interesting games and apps and things are available for them in English. So more and better language-centric artificial intelligence could help them to continue to develop their own language instead of the language shift to English.
Okay, thanks, Sabine. I think your example about Icelandic and Greenland reminds me of the situation of Czech maybe 15 years ago, which was exactly the same. But finally, it's there. So hopefully we will, with our concentrated push, we will be able to correct this situation. So Jim, from the French perspective and your perspective.
Good evening. Is my sound okay? Can you hear me? Yes, thank you very much for inviting me in. So my name is James Crowley, but Jim to my close friends. So in French, we tutoie et vous voir. If you tutoie me, I'm Jim. Otherwise, I'm James to my students. I'm professor at the Grenoble Institut Polytechnique, where I have the chair on collaborative intelligence systems at the University Grenoble-Alpes AI Institute. And I teach courses in computer vision, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not really in the natural language community, but we have a real converging interest here. And I wanted to tell you a little bit where I'm coming from and why it's so striking that we see such convergence. So I did my doctoral studies at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh in the 1970s and 80s, where I studied AI with Alan Newell and Herb Simon, and defended a doctoral thesis on view invariant computer vision in 1981 in collaboration with Takeo Kanade. I published in the domains of computer vision, robotics, and multimodal interaction, but not natural language processing and not spoken language interaction, although we're getting there. My current research concerns techniques for multimodal interaction with collaborative intelligent systems. So while I'm not really active in the community of natural language, our research interests are rapidly converging, particularly after the emergence of transformers and self-supervised learning using attention. I'll have more to say about this in a minute, and in particular, in response to Jan's Plan's questions, and also in reaction to the first speaker this morning with GPTX. But I know Joachim's going to talk about that as well, so I'm eager to hear what Joachim has to say about OpenGPTX. So I'll hold back for a second. I have some remarks prepared for the first and second questions, or the second and third questions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And finally, we have Joachim, who is representing the Fraunhofer Institute. And so we hope to hear also maybe partly the industrial perspective. So Joachim, please.
Yeah, also thank you from my side for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here. So, and I'm here in different roles, and I think this expresses also the situation that AI, language technology, are really interacting a lot and benefit from each other. So first, so the last time I was here in this round, I was in the role of the AI on demand platform, which will continue. So we bring together European AI technology into one platform, in one common platform. European Language Grid is one, I would say, a very important facet of this whole ecosystem. And I think it's very important that we think this together, that we think that we also have common plans to find the critical mass. The other role is that, as you said, so as Fraunhofer, our dedicated role is a transfer of research and innovation into industry in real application and use cases. So that's our mission. And we at Fraunhofer have also started a huge initiative with other Fraunhofer institutes to bring language dialogue technology on a very sophisticated level to the German industry. So that's initiative is called Alinga, and we have several projects around this Alinga projects. And so here we built currently a more German-oriented language speech dialogue platform. But so it's also clear that we can benefit from European efforts like AI on demand platform, from language grid initiatives. And what now comes to the main role of today, so OpenGPTX is the newest effort here, also from a national project to build large language models. And to be honest, I underestimated this a little bit 2 years ago. So I said, well, that's the next wave of AI, and let's see what happens. But now it becomes really clear so that we have to do in Europe a lot of effort to compete, to provide language models, to bring our data sources together, and to bring this from research to industry, from lab to market, and build also independent language models, and to learn how the language models really work, how to bring knowledge into the language models, knowledge representations. And we see also that, as Jim's already said, this multimodal aspect becomes more and more important. The classical barriers or the differentiation between the areas, computer vision, NLP, speech, disappears more and more, especially with the large language models, with the representation learning methods. And we have to consider this. So, and language is important. So I'm coming from the language technology. So I worked from my PhD on speech recognition technologies, and now it's clear so that we have to put effort in these large language models in Europe, and to make it as useful as possible for us.
Thank you, Joachim. So we have heard various points from various points of view, but language technology or language technology in AI is from Philip's. It's a natural part of it to simply language. Concern about small languages, to support for social sciences and humanities. So now there is space for your questions. So please, whether you are sitting here in Brussels or online, we will be happy to hear your opinion or your answer to any of the panelists now.
Don't be shy.
Yes, please. So please, microphone. And so first,
Okay, just a quick icebreaker kind of question, right? So I don't hear the word semantics, right, in pretty much anything what we talked today, right? So language is, well, the next level should be semantics and everything else. So, well, provocative question, why semantics was not mentioned today yet?
I completely agree. It's to my heart. but we did hear knowledge representation. I think it was Joachim, I think. So anyone wants to pick up on this? James, maybe?
Well, okay, I was just thinking that perhaps in the past we put too much emphasis on knowledge representation in AI. I think knowledge is something, I take Newell's definition still of knowledge, anything that enables you to take actions to accomplish goals. And I think in the past we thought we could handcraft this with programmers, but what we're really understanding now is it's about learning. It's about learning through interacting with the world and through interacting with the task domain. And this is the technology that's emerging now is allowing us to do that kind of online learning, which in a sense puts knowledge representation to the back burner. So I'm not going to quite agree with that. At the same time, I would also say that the fundamental use that we make for language is exactly for exchanging knowledge between ourselves. And this is how humans communicate knowledge. And it will certainly be how we communicate knowledge to our machines through natural language, but in a natural way, really natural language and not formal representations. So I'll take that iconoclastic point of view.
Okay. Philip.
Yeah, I wouldn't single out semantics here. Similar, I think, what James alluded to, right? It's really the combination of what we might call explicit models with neural models of the world. This could be differential equations. It could be simulation code. I mean, in Saarbrücken, we have this focus of what we call neuro-explicit models, or I mean, a lot of people call it hybrid AI, whatever you want to call it. It's really the combination of, I would say, explicit knowledge encoded in whatever way. That could be more logic-based approaches, or as I said, differential equations or other things. And so in that sense, all of AI, and I think a lot of the pure learning people are moving in that direction as well, which they didn't want to acknowledge a couple of years ago. So I think it's really, all of those are tools, and that's just like in any other problem. We need to choose the best tool to solve the problem that we have at hand. So
I agree.
Okay, thank you. So we had a question in the fourth row, but I will first ask, is there any online question, please? Not yet, okay.
No.
No, okay. So I think you had a question, right? Yeah.
I'm Christina Eide from the Norwegian Language Council. I have a question for Sabine. You mentioned that some languages, in particular smaller languages, they have language technology, but they're not allowed to include it in the big platforms. So I think probably many of these languages are also included in the European language grid. So, but my question is, of course, Microsoft might not listen to 15,000 Greenlandic people, but they might listen to several millions of Europeans. So what can Europe do what should Europe do to include these languages on the large platforms?
Okay, Sabine, I think that was for you, yeah.
Yes, you are absolutely right. It's not possible for such a small language community to really
lost the audio. Sabine, we can't hear you anymore.
We lost you.
Sorry, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I
now it's
didn't
okay.
realize that my microphone was not. So yeah, thank you for the question. And yes, of course, it's very difficult for these 50,000 people to make it. I mentioned this to Christel Schaldemose, who is the who was the chief negotiator for the European Parliament, actually, while they were having the negotiation regarding the tech giants. But the focus there was more on data security and personal data and things like fake news. And she recognized that, of course, this language problem was also part of it, but it hasn't really surfaced in the agreement that was made afterwards. And I think some effort should be made to make it more clear that this is also a part of the problem.
Okay, thanks. Any more questions, please, here. Yeah.
My name is Pilar Oreiro. I come from Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona, and I am perhaps from the other end of you. We don't research on technologies, but the application of we don't develop languages, but the application of the languages in media accessibility. My worry is that not only big companies don't care about small languages, but the European Parliament doesn't believe in minority languages. The European Commission doesn't believe in minority languages. Minority languages, or languages in general, all the engines are separate from the translation unit to the interpreters unit to the why are the resources not shared. To me, that's the application of efforts. The end user who pays for these technologies, of course, they don't have any access to them, to the translation engines, to the corporate, nothing at all. So democratic participation of the end user, as the end user, as you were saying, how important is the end user, and I think it's challenged by the approach or by the vision of the European Commission and the European Parliament towards languages and minorities. I know this is a tricky question, but...
Well, I mean, we don't have anyone from the Parliament here, I think. We have Philip from the Commission, but it is a difficult question. On the other hand, I think that exactly the initiatives like ELG and ELE and MetaNet and others, and of course FNIL, are pushing in that direction. And in fact, the Parliament, as far as I know, as Georg said, has actually approved this far-reaching declaration in 2018. I think, yes, you can say not much of it has been realized yet, but certainly it gives us some pushing power towards the Commission and the national governments to act on it. So that's my answer as not being affiliated with Parliament or the Commission, but I think there are efforts being made. And certainly even completely outside of this landscape, there are people and companies who are developing tools for many languages. ELG has tools for the basic analysis of languages for 130-something languages. So again, there might be gaps, of course, and there are gaps. It's not all the 7,000 languages anyway, but we are sort of going there. So hopefully next time there will be more positive comment from your part. Yeah, Sabine, please.
Yeah, I was actually a bit sorry to hear this comment, because I just wrote an article that basically says the European community and the European Commission is one of our best friends regarding language policy at the moment, because these pushes that have been made through the different projects, ELSC and the MetaNet and ELG and so on, have really been helpful and have also been able to make it possible to get into dialogue with the local governments. So I think I'm a bit sorry to hear that there is not the feeling that we are getting a lot of support. I really feel that we do get a lot of support.
Yeah, Philip, please. Yes.
I'm trying to wave as much as I can. I'm sorry, I need to intervene as the Commission representative in this building and the like. But I'm not talking on behalf of the Commission, of course. But one thing that I'm reasonably sure, when you say that the Parliament is not pro the local language, the regional language and the like, I think that it's wrong. We cannot say that. Neither for the Commission. When you look at the report they have issued in 2018 on the language equality, I mean the European Language Equality Project that you are going to see tomorrow, that you know about, would not exist without the European Parliament. Okay, so it is. Now, from a technical and practical point of view, I agree that there is problems. We are functioning in 3 languages, 24 languages, and already that is a challenge. I mean, from a budgetary point of view, it's a huge consumption. And in front of the European citizen, well, we have to reduce and the like. So we cannot afford, or we could not afford, to handle 60 languages and having everything translated. When I say we could not, it's actually that the language technology is changing the whole phase of this exercise. If you take, if only, for example, for the Commission point of view, we are now rolling out all our website in 24 languages, all the pages. Just imagine the quantity of document that was only available in English and sometime in French, sometime in German as well. Just because, honestly, because the cost of translation and the quality of translation, the cost went down and the quality went up. So it's a matter of support and financial. Now, on the other side, we also do all our best in order to make as much available the information, the data that we have put and created. Now, obviously, there have been challenges and the different communities and the like, but if you talk for the Parliament, for instance, and all the public panels and the like are made public, it's not easy to access, it's not automatically done and the like. And that's exactly one of the subjects of what I'm going to talk a little bit later. But I cannot say, no, the Parliament doesn't like the regional languages. Well, I'm not from the Parliament, but I cannot let that, neither the Commission either. So we try, we support, but we have our limit, and we try to be efficient. And that's a difficulty. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Philip. I think there was Daria wanted to say a little comment.
Just a quick comment that both the Europarl, Parallel Corpora, and the DGT translation memories are released, and these are by far the most used multilingual parallel resources.
Okay, so.
I think we have an online question right now.
Okay, online question, please. Yes.
There's one question. Is it possible to force corporations to open up their internal data sets that they collect from their users? Especially multimodal interaction data is a real bottleneck, and no public sector can compete with the big IT corporations.
Okay, so maybe Joachim, there was this part about companies using multimodal data or not releasing multimodal data. Please.
Yeah, so I think the access to company data will become more and more important also to train these large models or to do also other approaches. It's still a challenge if you talk to companies. That's totally true. And I think Europe has a good answer to this, but of course this needs also time to establish this IDS and Gaia X data exchange mechanisms, and that's a good chance to be successful. That companies open their treasure a little bit more, their data treasure, but it's a long way. It's a long way to get access, and I think projects like ELG here do a tremendous job to bring data together. Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And here we have also to put more and more multimodal corpora into ELG like repositories. I think that's an important step forward. That projects like ELG are taking care doing this. Yeah, but we have to enforce and motivate the companies to open their data sources somehow, and technically hopefully we will, but we need also regulations here, so to make it safe for the companies and to build trust. Yeah, at the end it's a measure, it's a question of trust. Yeah, and this trust to give data away, it's still not completely there, so this will take time. But this, that's a chance Europe has, but we need also some, I think, regulation, some political help to do so, and then we can hopefully also bring our data resources together.
Okay, thank you, Joachim. I'm glad you mentioned the regulations because I wanted to add that it's also a legal question and that we all know that even the copyright directive has not been adopted by more than half of the states in Europe. So it's almost 1 year overdue. And even that will not solve all the problems, especially for multimodal data. So yes, I mean, on the legislative side, it's very important that it's reviewed and it goes forward. So I think we should move forward. I have more questions. At least one I would like to ask the panel and give you turns. And that's not really a question. It's a request to give us your vision where language technology will be in 2030, almost 10 years from now. So, and we will go now in the opposite direction again. So I think Joachim, please start.
Yeah, so my vision for 2030 is, I mean, what we started, but it's also a long way. I mean, we all agree that language is a key technology for AI, but also key technology to interact with machines, with content, in our daily lives, and it will be important and even more important in the future. And therefore, I think what should be really the vision and a little bit also the dream of all of us is to achieve and to come up in 10 years with a European really convincing dialogue framework, speech, voice dialogue framework with really stronger capabilities, what we see now. I think the race is still open to the real dialogue there because many research questions are not really solved. And what you started with ELG, what others started, so that these initiatives really find the synergies and that we come up with a strong European dialogue environment where companies, research partners really can bring themselves in, can have their own roles, and that it's attractive for the European researchers, that they don't go to the large companies, and that we bring this from research, what I said before, from research to lab, from the lab to the industry, and that we have such ecosystem, environment, technology stack, how you want to call it, which has European values, which has European quality, where European research results are really included, and which bring us an important future in this area. But this, of course, requires a lot of capacity, money also, but also a lot of political work, a lot of strategic work, and that's a little bit my dream for the next 10 years.
Okay, thanks, Joachim. So the ecosystem is certainly a very important thing, and we all try to push it that way. So James, your vision.
I'm going to take a somewhat different take on that question and say what could happen if we don't take action. And that is we may all end up working for Google or Amazon or Facebook, the American companies. Transformers, that is stacked autoencoders using self-attention trained with self-supervised learning, are revolutionary technology, not just for language technologies, but for computer vision, for acoustic perception, for speech recognition, for robotics, for multimodal interaction. The use of transformers for multimodal interaction in particular is a real game changer. It provides an elegant solution to long-standing open problems related to data fusion, abstraction, and exploiting the complementary nature of perception and communication modalities. But we in Europe have a real problem. The cost in computing power for world-class research in machine learning is doubling every 3 or 4 months. The only way to do serious world-class research in machine learning now is to work for Google or Amazon or Facebook or OpenAI. The rest of us are reduced to building systems using pre-trained models provided by these companies, things such as BERT, GPT-3, or other transformers. This was well illustrated by the talk this morning by Jonas and Willis. And the problem is this trend is going to continue and get worse if we don't do something about it. Transformers are not only a revolutionary technology for natural language. as we saw this morning. They're revolutionary for all different sorts of areas. But hold on, I'm rereading saying the same thing. The trouble is, what we've seen is these models that we're inheriting from the American companies have US values and US culture baked in as a bias. Right? And not only that, they're the ones who control the evolution of technology. I can see great things to do with transformers in multimodal interaction if I had enough data and computing power. Just a side comment on the data question we had just now. I don't want my personal data being snarfed up. My data is fuel for machine learning. It has real value that's growing. But we do need the data to do the machine learning. But I should be able to sell that data and not have it taken away from me by some kind of fiat. Anyway, to be truly competitive, to finish, and to harness this breakthrough for the benefit of humanity, we need open access to high-performance computing and large-scale data. Not just for training language models, but for training extremely large models for vision, for robotics, for multimodal combinations of perception action, and for all uses of AI. And we can only do that if we have the right, if the required computing power and data, which we don't now. We're being pushed out of the game by this doubling of required computing power every few months. So I'll say more about that in a second with the other question. But I think I've cut the message across. We need help, okay? And we need help because we're on the wrong trajectory. And that's where we're going to go in 10 years if we don't get off this trajectory.
Okay, thank you, James. So Sabine.
Yeah, thank you also, James. That was really an eye-opener. You're absolutely right that this is a danger that we have to face. I'm actually quite impressed with the development that language technology and AI have taken during the last couple of years. And also when you see what has been presented today, I've been working in this area for 40 years and it has never been as fast as we see it go now. So my expectations are rather high. And like Joachim, I expect dialogue to improve. I find the dialogue with chatbots and with Alexa and Google Home painstaking. I cannot use Alexa in Danish, so I use German, and my Danish husband is struggling to get the lights off and the curtains down and so on. So we really need better coverage for more languages and actual dialogue based on language understanding, deep language understanding, and more robustness towards accents and different types of users. I really hope to see language technology for more languages, especially translation tools and tools for language learning. Ideally for all languages spoken in Europe, and especially migrant languages, it will be crucial, I think, for the future. Because the way things are going now, we will have more migration. And that's also why the next topic of the EFNU conference in October will be language and migration. And we will join there and have also participation from the European Commission. I hope also that more people in the future will understand language technology better. I think that's a real problem also regarding fake news and expectations to what language technology actually is. Many people don't know what they're dealing with and what the possibilities are, and they don't understand the limitations and the pitfalls. So when we had the ELE service recently, we could see that the people still only use very basic language technology tools, such as search tools and spell checkers and MT, and they have problems unlocking the full potential, for instance, of speech technology and to become more efficient in their workplace. And the other area where I think language technology and AI is not really in the front yet is schools. So integrating the knowledge about what language technology is in their curricula is still not happening. So I hope there will be much more focus on that, and also using language technology for games and entertainment apps, which is really lacking.
Okay, thank you, Sabine. That was another point of view, so I'm glad how it plays well. But now, Philip, please.
Well, first of all, I think we're seeing a great model for what I would like to see in 2030 in the language community. I mean, if you ask me, I would say it's probably the best integrated, the best collaborating AI community in Europe. What we've seen this morning in terms of infrastructure, in terms of tools that are being created together, that are put together, that are working together, we haven't really seen this in any other community to the degree that I'm seeing it here. And so if we can replicate this in other areas and integrate other tools with what has been created here, and both ways, I guess, ideally, that would be really a great development. I think we should kind of advertise that more towards the outside. I think there's a lot to be learned from how you're operating, the language community here is operating. That's the one thing. The other thing is, you might remember when we founded CLAIRE 4 years ago, one of the key elements that we argued for is that wide network, then the centers of excellence, and we kind of, with the excellence networks, we're kind of creating them. But the third element was that what I like to call the CERN for AI, this center, this eventually the European Union called the lighthouse, but then watered it down into saying, oh, but we need many, many lighthouses. And then the whole idea of a lighthouse is kind of gone, at least from my perspective. Now, what we're seeing right now with these large AI models, I won't call it language model because they're not just language anymore, is exactly that, right? I mean, we cannot simply afford to creating the HPC infrastructure for every country in Europe, right? I mean, even Germany and France probably would be struggling to keep up with the big American companies. So we exactly need that infrastructure, and that needs to be coordinated, and the different researchers that want to use it need to do that. That's exactly what the physicists are doing at CERN and have been doing for many, many decades by now. And I think that is what we proposed it 4 years ago, and we were kind of sometimes laughed out of the room, and now we don't need this, we just need a couple of GPUs in our server room. And we're seeing now that, right, to really do large-scale AI, we need that infrastructure, and we need public access to that. I'm fully with Jim here, and we need to organize this. We have never done that before, and because that infrastructure is not available, European researchers are not even able to do the stuff that we would like to do and probably be able to do if we had that infrastructure. So it's a really, really important part. I think we don't need to look just at the EU, but really at the member countries as well to make that happen. So that should be, from my perspective, a major goal to look at in the next few years, and that will change the landscape in Europe. The maybe other topic that I think maybe for AI in general is really trusted AI, what we call trusted AI, is how can we provide guarantees for the kind of AI algorithm that we're using increasingly, right? You all know that, right? A stop sign with a couple of colored patches and the AI detects something completely different. It's really holding back AI. I'm not an expert in language technology to what degree this is also a major problem here, but certainly, I mean, the industry is pushing strongly forward for that in safety concerns and in those areas, robotics, industrial robotics, and many other areas. So I think that's another really important part. And right, while we might not, safety is maybe not the major issue in the language context, we need these same guarantees on the ethical side in terms of bias and all the other topics, right? And the techniques for providing some sort of guarantees is probably very similar between those. So I think that's a major push that we need to look at.
Okay, thanks. I think definitely language technology has the same or very similar issues. Like you can imagine a dialogue with a doctor, where the doctor is AI, certainly language is 90% of it. Okay, so Daria, please.
Yeah, I think I will sound a bit repetitive because so many of the ideas that we have heard so far are also in my notes. As a European citizen, my vision for 2030 is that all the misunderstandings by then will not be related to language barriers. There will certainly still be misunderstandings, but we should lift the barrier between the languages. As a person that needs to also take care of research infrastructures, I think we need to acknowledge that communication in the form of speech and video will dominate by 2030, and by that, the natural language processing community needs to become natural language processing community, not text processing community, which I think is a very narrow form of natural language. And the question here is, are research infrastructures ready for this leap? I think we're not yet, and we need to do this, and we cannot do this alone. I think we need to team up, both in terms of physical infrastructures as well as virtual infrastructures. Language resources will not be the only ones needed. We will also need so much more, but there also needs to be quite a lot of heavy-duty knowledge transfer between the domains, the communities, because we really do need to, on the one hand, manage expectations of researchers that will be applying the technologies that we're developing or making available in a responsible way, but also for the new technologies that we will be making on offer, we need to talk to those research communities to better understand what it is that they really need, so that we don't push down the throats the technologies that we think they need. We also need to do better in terms of educating the end users, how to make sure that they're using the right technology for the right applications, how they can make sure that the performance is up to the standards that they need. There could be high-risk usage scenarios that we want to avoid, misusing technology, etc. And another important angle that I need to mention today is that while we are talking about language technologies, I think we need to realize and start acting on the fact that language alone is not enough. Together with using language, people also use all the other elements in communication for sharing social signals, and our language technologies need to capture and be able to deal with that. And another final vision that I don't think has been mentioned so far by this community is that while we all care about all language of Europe today, Clarin as a research infrastructure also cares about the languages that are no longer in use, but belong to the cultural heritage, that we also need to find funding and focus to support, because without understanding the past, we won't be able to understand the future. Thanks.
Okay, so thanks, Daria. So thanks to all five of you for different perspectives on and different visions from various points of view. So now it's up to you. Yeah. So we have one question over there.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Gerhard Backfried from Hensoldt Analytics. I recently listened to Tanja Schulz of the University of Bremen on a talk, plenary, called Biosignal Processing for Adaptive Cognitive Systems, where Tanja was talking about silent speech, and she was actually also talking about just turning thoughts into words and into actions. We are talking about the spoken words or the written words here, and we have been for a while, and all make sense. Are we including cognitive sciences enough? And shouldn't we also maybe aim at the neural representations rather than be completely paralyzed by the encoder-decoder attention revolution that's been taking place over the last 4 or 5, whatever, since 2018?
Thanks, Gerhard, for the question. Okay, James, please.
Yeah, just a really quick comment. And I'm interested in airplanes, and so I study the way birds fly. No, that's a flip comment. We do need cognitive science, of course. Cognitive science informs us about a lot of things, starting with some of the ideas of encoder-decoders and attention. You know, the ideas were there in cognitive science beforehand. So yeah, we need to include them, but let's not lose our focus as well. We are talking about a technology based on silicon right now, and that's inspiration for models, but we're not. I personally don't think that we can get intelligence by duplicating or modeling in great detail the neurological structure of the brain, but we can certainly gain inspiration with principles, and we certainly learn important limits for the way we interact between artificial and natural systems. But I'll shut up. There's more important things to say than that.
Okay, thanks, James. Or Philip, yes, please.
Yeah, maybe just strengthening what Jim just said. I think it's one of the biggest issue or gaps, I would say, in AI research right now is that we're not better integrating this with the neuroscience area, which are making leaps and strides forward in understanding how the human brain works. And no, the issue is not replicating this, but understanding better how the human brain, which is the most complex thing, I guess, that we know about, and that we try to replicate functionality of, right? We need to better understand that. And vice versa, I think there is a lot of technology that we could develop for modeling human thinking with using the AI technology. We don't fly like birds, and so we certainly don't want to use AI. Well, maybe we do, we don't know. But we probably will do AI differently than the human brain, but there's certainly a lot that we can learn. And I think that is one of the largest underfunded areas related to AI. We thought about this in DFKI, about doing stuff there, but it's actually really hard because the funding isn't really there. So if there's one thing for 2030 that I can add to the list, it would certainly be that.
No, I completely agree. I think this example with birds and planes, I heard from one of my mentors in life, which was Fred Jelinek, the pioneer in statistical speech in the 80s last century, was saying exactly that we should take the inspiration from the nature, but then not necessarily our applications will look like birds, but we should learn. Okay, thank you. And any other word from the panelists? Okay, so the next question. Do we have any online question?
No.
Okay. So anyone from the audience here? No vision? Oh, there is a vision question.
Hi there. My name is Adrian Lemons. I'm a computational linguist, but I used to work in the industry as well. Throughout the last hour, I've noticed that fairly often technical matters kind of get mixed with ideological questions. For instance, small languages or minority languages should be conserved. It's that they shouldn't sort of be spoken less, or you know, if speakers get more out of using a different language, then that's a problem, or we shouldn't be reliant on American technology. Or have an over-reliance on such technology. To me, those sound like ideological questions, whereas at the same time, there are technical questions. We need more data, we need more infrastructure, and I mean hardware infrastructure. If we ever want to stand a chance to compete, then yes, we probably need a way to pool data that at the moment is proprietary, which means some kind of federated learning scheme. I thought the comparison with what the Large Hadron Collider is doing, that's a pretty good one, although there are physicists who are not a fan of the way that that funding scheme is working at the moment. In any case, I'm just curious, in your opinion, is it possible to have this conversation without sort of intermingling the ideological and the technical side? Or is it possible to have a purely scientific discussion on the one hand that is decoupled from that? And I'm reserving judgment whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm just curious because it does muddy the waters, I find, to the point where it's sometimes difficult to tell what's at stake here.
Okay, anyone wants to pick up? That's a difficult question, I guess. Joachim?
Well, with ideological views, so I wouldn't emphasize too much. I mean, at the end, when we have now the discussion, you're completely right, repeats from time to time, so that we are somehow dominated, especially in the research area, but also now from the application area, from US hyperscalers, and it's very difficult for Europe to compete. But to be honest, at the end, I would say we should at least play with the same tools or same level. It starts from the salary of good researchers. It starts from infrastructure, as Jim already mentioned. And here, what I would request or what will wish as European researcher or research manager, that we are on the equal level, that we have the equal opportunity to do research on this level. And this becomes more and more important. Maybe this is some ideological issue, but at the moment, I have the impression it's more and more difficult to be on the same level, because now we have this, what Jim already said, these two ingredients: computational resources, access to data, and also salaries of good researchers. So it's a different level. So and this doesn't fit. So and here we have to make this as topic. So to come to this equal level to do research in a good environment. And if you call it ideological, then it's true.
Okay, thanks, Joachim. Anyone else? Sabine? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, you wouldn't develop artificial intelligence if it was not because you want to get a better society and a better life for the people that are using it. Otherwise, the purpose would not be relevant. And of course, you can discuss whether we should all speak English or not, and whether that would be an adequate solution. But if you look at the countries around us, then that is not what people do want. And I think if technology and science doesn't, work for the good of the people and what they need, then we'll have a problem. I think you can't just sort of separate the two things. To me, of course, the most important thing is, where do you want to go for the people? And the next question is then, how can technology help us do this?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. So, anything to react?
Thank you for your answers. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be sat here if I didn't agree with you to a large extent. Although, again, I find it difficult to not challenge you at the same time, to say that the question of where you want to go as a society if you want to use AI, that too is very much an ideological point. Whereas I think for most, you could say, companies that stand to benefit from something like the European language grid, the betterment of society is not the primary goal. It's increasing revenue. It's increasing efficiency. And I think it would be a bit naive to ignore that. That's, I guess, that would be my reaction to that point.
Okay. Can I maybe respond to that? But that is the entire point, right? There's this term digital sovereignty that's been coined, and I think this is very, very clear and very much to the point of what we're discussing here, right? And we cannot separate technology from that, as Sabine just said, right? If you want to be able to live up to human value, European values, human values, right, then you need the technology to be able to do that. And as you just said, right, it's not necessarily in the interest of Google or Amazon or any of the other big players, or whether they are from China, to do that. And so that means we need the technology means to be able to do that. And that's where the whole thing is just linked at the very core. And so we cannot separate the two, right? So, I mean, yeah, I leave it at that.
Okay. No, I think you are right in this. I think the farther we go in this between the basic research, where possibly we could talk just about technical stuff, towards the applications, we cannot ignore the environment in which this development, both in technology and applications, is actually taking place. So I think the next one was Francois. I noticed you, Philippe, as well, and Tomáš as well, but Francois was first.
No, I mean, that's okay. I just wanted to make the same point that it's really difficult to distinguish the two aspects. And I mean, when we talk about data, data is language in our case, and language belongs to people. It's produced by people. It's used by people. So it's really important to keep this in mind. I mean, we don't just have data sitting there somewhere, and then that can be trained and used for training languages, language model, for instance. Language is part of our life, and so it's really important if these large models and if this technology are being disseminated all over and used in our daily lives, we need to keep control on the way this technology works.
Okay, thanks. So I think Philip wanted to say.
Yes, is it working? Yeah. I need to bounce again. I'm sorry. I really enjoy it. No. But the philosophical and the technological one, one of the best sentences we have generated when we need to decide which language to spend money on. Okay? Language which are socially and economically relevant for Europe. Okay? You have these two words. And hey, guys, do the balance and decide. I mean, ultimately, we are, and the governmental institution and the grouping and the line, we are only mirrors of the society. Okay, so we try to hear and we try to balance, we try to satisfy everybody, and of course there is no money for everybody. So we try to satisfy it. And I really enjoyed that question. Thanks a lot, because I was in the back, laughing, that's going to be interesting and the like. But there is also a responsibility for everybody here. As we say, we are more a mirror of what is happening. But the society needs to be organized and the community needs to be organized. So, and it's also the responsibility of the different coordination institutions to come back and to provide the right signals to us. Because I'm often hearing that we are shooting on the left, we are shooting on the right, we don't know what to do. Hey, because we receive the information from the community that are fighting. Fighting why? Because they want to get the maximum of the money out of it. So sometimes we shoot on the left and the right. Yeah, James is having fun and he knows about that. Huh? But my call here, instead of bouncing back to say, well, the Commission doesn't know what to do with our money, I would come back to the coordination institution, the CSAs and all the synchronization group and the like, to work together and to come back. And I think that this, you were saying actually, this community is well organized, but because you see it a little bit from outside. Of course, the closer you get, the more small fight you've got. But they ended up having the common goal and the like. So that's one of the message as well, that from the AI community, that's also one of the things that you have to defend. You have to defend the whole groups and the whole different communities in front of the AI. Because I had the feeling that's what I heard. Sometimes it's easy to blame the Commission, but everybody has its role in this exercise. No, one argument, and then I finish because it's not my war here. Member state. It's very important as well that the member states are involved and on all levels, not only on the funding, because you see the funding, but also on the coordination. And we do the effort, but you also have to do the role, because you are the representative of your research community in your countries in coming back and the like. So we try to do our best, but it's an organization of everybody. I'm sorry I took it too long.
Okay, thanks, Philip. So in fact, you sort of answered what would have been my last question, but because we do not have time, I still want to give last word to each of the panelists. So without asking the last question, now you have 1 minute each to say us the most important message that we all here and the audience should hear. So Joachim, please.
Yeah, so basically I would repeat, so let's have one common goal, which is to have a European, I call it, replace it, but a European Alexa, which is relevant for researchers, industry, and which also is in the bring benefit to the European citizens. And that this is our common goal, and let's go for this goal.
Thanks. James.
Okay, well, I was expecting the question about what's important to fund. And I was going to start with a flip comment that any self-respecting scientist will ask, fund my research. It's vital. So sure, it's vital that we fund research on multimodal interaction with collaborative intelligent systems. That's what I do. But seriously, notice I said interaction and not just perception. Intelligence requires interaction. Intelligence is a description of interaction, and we need not to lose sight of that. Perception is an enabling technology, but we've got to really now concentrate on multimodal interaction and do it in a very natural way to have truly natural collaboration between humans and machines. And let me stop with one final phrase. It's a slogan that we made up a few years ago for Humane AINet, but it's kind of quiche, but I'll repeat it. In California, AI is for profit. In China, AI is for control. In Europe, we want AI to be for humanity. I'll stop there.
Thanks a lot. So, Sabine.
Yes, I certainly subscribe to the last statement. Definitely, that was very nicely put. Someone in the beginning of this spoke about language understanding and deep language understanding, and actually that was the last point that I wanted to make. I really support the research into the development of applications based on the resources that are already in the European language grid. I think it's really impressive what can be done, and especially support research that will push the development further towards deep language understanding. And one way to do this is, for instance, to look at terminological data that has been fairly overlooked for many years. And I think it is very useful, maybe also in this direction. In the Nordic countries, there are huge efforts made towards standardizing terminology in public services, not only as word list, as most people conceive it like, but as database entries with clear definitions, and they are even organized in conceptual semantic systems or ontologies. And they model, so to say, the reality that the public IT systems are working on. So their purpose is to ensure semantic compatibility between digital public services, such as patient journals, tax collection system, property registration, social services, and so on. But at the same time, they model a part of the society that deal with these areas. So although they may have been created for a different purpose to start with, they ensure, and so they ensure the compatibility between the systems. I believe that they have big potential for language technology and AI. And I think working with these concepts around in the public area is something that needs to be done if we want to integrate the systems with and their functionality with language.
Okay. Thank you, Sabine. So now here, Philip.
Yeah, I started with the motto of Claire of excellence in all of AI. And I think also these large language models are kind of forcing us to do that, right? To come together, to combine language with images, with video, with multimodal and semantics and what have you. So I think this is really a great chance for the broader AI community to come together. So we should use it for that and not try to stick to our individual small communities, but really try to integrate among them. But then on the other hand, and that's something that hasn't been brought up now, is, right, I mean, these systems compute for weeks, if not months, on huge numbers of GPUs with huge energy resources being used for that. And they are great for a big company like Google, who first of all can do it, and then they have the scale to actually use the results. For the German industry or the European industry, which are much smaller, medium-sized maybe, how do we make these models available? How can we scale them I mean, not every company can do these large models for themselves. That obviously doesn't work. So, and I think this hybrid AI, this combination of pure learning with more explicit models is one way that's certainly highly interesting to make these things better, less resource intensive, which, by the way, there is climate change out there, and we need to look at that and not spend it on learning huge models that, if there are better ways, then we need to find those better ways.
Okay, thanks, Philip. So, last word, Daria.
In terms of financial support, I tried to imagine Europe where there's no difference between national and EC funding, because really we're all after the same goal. We want to promote the availability of language technologies for the European citizens, but also for the researchers in Europe. We want to ensure systematic, strategic, full support regardless of where the funding comes from. And in terms of the challenges for the research infrastructure and ensuring the interoperability, if you imagine physical infrastructures, nobody cares if they need to be stuck for a couple of weeks in the middle of the road because we're investing into a better future. We should also not pretend that research infrastructures can be immediately invisible. We need to take into account that for a while it's okay to give it a lot of funding and still be stuck in some important crossing point, wait for it to be ready for a better future. And when asking why fund this, I would switch the question around and I would seriously ask all of you, why not?
Okay, so thank you for your last words. I think we have heard a lot of opinions. I would also like to thank the audience. We got many questions, and actually the provocative ones I asked for, and we have had a good discussion. But first of all, or last of all, I would like to thank the panelists. So Joachim Keller from Fraunhofer, James Crowley from Grenoble, France, Sabine Kirchmeier, the president of EFNIL, Philip Schlusalek, the head of CLAIR, and Daria Fischer, the future CEO of Clarin. So thank you very much. We have at least 2 of the panelists available. The others are certainly available on email or otherwise. And you are free to approach us and all of them in any way you wish. And we hope that together we can push language technology further. Thank you very much.
Right, there's a coffee break now. Let's reconvene at 3:15. Yeah, we're slightly behind time, but it doesn't matter.